So in this video, we're just going to discuss the fundamentals of notes and notation. Specifically, we want to get a feel for the layout of a piano, as well as where notes fit in terms of how we can notate different pitches in terms of the different notes that exist, say, on a keyboard or on any other instrument. The reason that we mostly discuss the layout of a piano is because a lot of music theory revolves around piano and the way that notes are laid out on it. It creates a really nice way for us to be able to discuss different ideas in music theory because we can naturally see how things progress in a really simple sort of format. So we typically start by discussing how the piano is laid out. And then from there, you can take that idea and apply it to a variety of different instruments, whatever instrument you happen to play. So when we take a look at the instrument, you'll see that we have groups of white and black keys. In this video, we're really just going to concern ourselves with the white keys, which are known as the natural notes. When we have the black keys, they denote sharp and flat notes. So they'll add sharps and flats to the different notes. But if you're just beginning, you don't really have to worry about that right now. We'll discuss it sort of in a later video. So when we take a look at the different notes, you'll notice that each note is named based on a letter of the alphabet. And one observation that you can make is that we only use the letters from A to G. So you'll see here we have A all the way up to G. Once we reach G, we repeat back at A. So we only allow for the letters from A to G, and that's how we specify the different pitches that exist. So as we move up the keyboard, our pitch in our note increases. So for instance, I'll play a few of these notes on the keyboard now. So that was me moving up the keyboard. So as you can see, the pitch increases as we move up the piano. As we move down in the opposite direction, the pitch will decrease. So that's the general relationship between the notes, is that as we move up the keyboard, the pitch increases. As we move down the keyboard, the pitch decreases. The other important idea that you want to know about how the piano is laid out is the way that we can find notes like C or any of the other notes. You will notice that C is always at the start of a group of two black keys. So you can see C is here and C is here. It's always the first key in a set of two black keys. On the other hand, F here is always the first note on a set of three black keys. So knowing these two rules, you can fill in the rest of the keyboard fairly easily. If you were to get like a section of the keyboard, all you have to do is find either a group of two or a group of three black notes. And then you know that at the beginning of the group of three, we would have F. At the beginning of the group of two, we would have C. So that's the general way that we can place those different notes. And then from there, as we move to the right, the note name just increases in the sequence of letters. So we go C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and so on. And knowing that, you now know how to place all of the different notes on the piano keyboard. So if you ever wanted to play the piano, you would be able to know where these different notes are. And as long as we have a way to be able to tell you where those notes are, you would be able to make the different sounds required to play a different songs or pieces. So the next thing that we should naturally ask is, well, how do we tell someone which notes we want them to play? To discuss this, we can discuss the idea of treble and bass clef as well as the staff or musical staff. The general idea is that we have a midpoint in our keyboard, which is known as middle C. So it's a pitch that is like right in the middle. We consider everything above middle C to be a part of the treble clef and everything below middle C to be a part of the bass clef. So for instance, let me play you a note that's in the treble clef. And now let me play you a note that is in the bass clef. You can hear that the tone or pitch of the notes in the bass clef are lower than the pitch of the notes that are in the treble clef. And that's the general relationship, is that the treble clef is going to be the higher pitched notes and the bass clef is going to be the lower pitched notes. So generally, most instruments are going to stick to one of the clefs. They'll either be in the treble clef or the bass clef. And then instruments like piano or similar ones might use both of the clefs. So with piano, we can play the treble clef and the bass clef, which is another reason that makes it good for being able to discuss theory ideas. So the treble clef is always denoted by this fancy looking symbol here. It's actually meant to look like a scripted G, so like a really fancy G. And this in turn is actually called the G clef. And the reason that it's called the G clef is because essentially sometimes you'll see like a dot placed here, and it's placed right along the line that corresponds with the note G. So from this, when we have our treble clef, all we really need to do is keep in mind some of the rules of where the notes are. The first line is E, and then we can take a look at all of the lines separately. So we can see that it goes like E, and then G is the next line, and then B is the next line, and then D is the next line, and then F is the final line. Alternatively, you can look at it as moving from line to space. So E is the first line, and then F is the next note which goes on a space, and then G is the line that follows that, and then A is the next space, and so on and so forth like that. A lot of the times we think of things as lines and spaces because then we can make nice little mnemonics to discuss them. So with the lines, we have E, G, B, D, F. And you might know the mnemonics to discuss this if you've studied any amount of music. You could say like, every good bird does fly, for instance. That would be an example of a mnemonic that we can use to sort of memorize the different line values. And then if we take a look at the space values, we'll see that there's F, A, C, E, or face. So it spells out the word face. So from that, you'll be able to sort of memorize any of these treble clef notes, right? If you see something on the second space, you can go F, A, and you know it's the A note. So that's the way that we can generally read all of these different notes. And from this, now I know how to play each of these notes because I know that this E here is the first E that's above middle C. So let me play this sequence for you. Let's see what this sounds like. So that'd be an example of playing the notes sort of in this sequence of notes, right? So you can see that these notes have a sort of higher pitch associated with them, and as we move to the right, we're increasing in pitch. So as we're moving up the staff, the pitch is increasing, and as we move down the staff, the pitch is decreasing. So with this, you're able to tell what each note is. You can tell that that E there is the first E after the middle C note. As long as you can find the middle of the keyboard, or that middle C note, you can find every other note respective to it, because they'll just be like the next E or the next F based on the rules that we discussed on the previous slide. And with other instruments, there'll be other ways of finding that sort of root area, and you'll be able to learn those sort of rules based on the notes that are notated here. The general idea is that we're able to just consistently represent the idea of these notes cleanly on the paper or on the screen or whatever we're writing our music on. So now the next thing that we'll discuss is the idea of the bass clef, which is all of the lower notes, all of the notes below middle C. So with the bass clef, we're taking a look at notes that are lower in pitch, right? So let me play these notes for you to give you a bit of an idea of what these notes could sound like. So you can see that those have a lot lower of a pitch compared to our treble clef notes. But the general way that we actually take care of like the lines and the spaces is very similar. We just have a different starting point and a different ending point, right? You'll see now that the line starts at a G, and then we have B, D, F, and A. So we now have G, B, D, F, A as our notes. Our good birds do fly always, or whatever mnemonic you want to use to try to memorize those different values. And then on the spaces, you have A, C, E, G, which I usually use all cows eat grass to memorize that one. Another thing that you can take a look at is the way that this bass clef is written. So this is the symbol that indicates that we're in the bass clef. The line between these two dots corresponds with the note F. So sometimes this is also called the F clef, and it's actually meant to look like a really fancy scripted F. So that's the general way that we can sometimes remember that as well. So with this all together, you would now have a good idea of how to actually read music and be able to place each of these notes on each of these clefs. And generally understanding, like, as we move up in pitch or as we move down in pitch, what's happening on the musical notation as we're doing that. And having a good understanding of this is going to be key to understanding other ideas of theory, because we're often going to write notes with this notation. So being able to know which notes are which is a really essential idea of music theory, and really playing music in general. If you want to be able to play other people's music, it helps a lot to be able to play and read sheet music. So that generally gives you an idea of the concepts of notation. And in future videos, we'll discuss a few other things that we can learn about this notation, as well as introducing sharps and flats and all sorts of different new complexities to the notation.